Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Owen Ma, and I'm the head of partnerships at Epik. And I'm here to talk to you today about bringing brands into your game. And when I say that, you're probably wondering what that means. Well, in the video game industry right now, these things are called crossover collaborations, and they look a little bit like this. You've probably seen this in the media, bringing in limited time characters or doing live events in video games. So this past year, you've probably seen Terminator and Mortal Kombat, even Ultraman in Arena Valor, the #1 MOBA with 100 million daily active users, or Little Nos in Roblox, Travis Scott in Fortnite doing live virtual concerts. But what are these really? Crossovers are really just short-term licensing agreements. You need to sign a licensing agreement to bring in IP or brand for a short period of time, lasting anywhere from 1 day all the way up to even a year. But who is Epik to really talk about this? Well, this is what we do. We are a global agency that focuses on collaborating with brands and video games. We put brands into different games, and these crossovers can generate new revenue from selling digital items or digital merchandise that we call Epik items. Over the past year, we've done a dozen deals on our own. And you're going to see in my upcoming slides all the different crossovers that we've done with our various clients and different IP. Finally, we're also a technology company where we utilize blockchain technology. So what are the benefits of crossovers? Well, crossovers are, again, like I said, licensing deals. And the benefit of doing crossovers is that it helps increase player engagement and retention and generate new revenue. One of the biggest challenges of crossovers or video games is actually new content creation. And that's what bringing in crossovers does. Think of a talk show, something like Jimmy Fallon or Conan. People watch these shows because they not only love the Conan and Jimmy Fallon, great content, but they also want to watch the different guests that they bring in. It's because you want to interact with these guests, learn more about them. So players in your video game are the same way. They love the game, but they want to interact with something different. And that's why you bring in brands or IP that they're already familiar with. And that's what crossovers are doing. And it's happening more and more every day. So crossovers are really just a new tool in your toolbox to help you drive user engagement, increase your retention, and generate new revenue. So as I mentioned, crossovers are really just licensing, and that's what we're here to learn about. So what is licensing? Well, licensing is really just the right to use intellectual property. Intellectual property can be anything from a game, incorporating a game into your existing game. So mini games, bringing in music into your video game. So that's a different intellectual property. But what we focus on is bringing in a person's character or likeness or brand into a game. So that's what that is. Pretty simple, right? Pretty straightforward. But this is what everybody really wants to know. How much is it going to cost? So although there's different factors that go into licensing, let's focus on just how much it would cost and how I can use it. So when it goes into how much things cost, we got to look at the 3 different categories when doing a licensing deal. We look at the royalty and revenue share, the minimum guarantee, and an advance. And finally, the rights, how I can use it. Again, seems pretty straightforward. But when we get into royalty share, you're thinking, this is easy. All I got to do is think of a percentage that myself and the brand or IP agree upon. Pretty straightforward, right? Well, it's not so simple. Here are some of the questions and dialogues that typically happen when we talk about royalties and the revenue share. Things like, well, is the royalty going to be based upon performance? How much sales should the crossover perform for the certain royalty? What if the royalty doesn't, or what if the sales don't perform as well? Is there going to be a penalty? What if I exceed the sales performance? Is there going to be a bonus? So those are the things that aren't, add to the royalty and the revenue share. But the thing is, the key takeaway here is that every deal is going to be different. So unfortunately, there's no standard of what the royalty or revenue is going to be. The next part that makes up this is the minimum guarantee. What's that? The MG. So once you've got the royalty rates figured out, you got your sales projections figured out, well, the minimum guarantee is the base price that the brand would want. Basically, the minimum amount of money that it's going to cost you to have that IP for the term of the agreement. Same thing. What's MG? How's that going to be determined? Is MG always going to be the same? Is it going to be based upon a percentage of the sales revenue? If so, what's that percentage? Unfortunately, same thing. MG's not guaranteed or not fixed. Everything's always going to change. So in a way, these are definitely familiar things you should be aware of before approaching any type of licensing. And you might think that's already done. But once you've got your MG figured out, here comes the advance. The advance is part of the MG. It's recoupable. Now, you're thinking, okay, why would I have to pay in advance when I've already got the royalty figured out? Unfortunately, that is also part of the licensing deal. Brands want to make sure that you're serious about getting the license. They need some sort of upfront payment. Again, the advance is part of the MG, and we want to figure out what is that going to be like? How is that calculated? Is the amount of the advance fair or not fair? When do I got to pay the advance? Can the advance be broken up into different payments? So as I mentioned, licensing can be pretty simple. It's just about how much you're going to pay for it. But again, different levers come into play when you're determining how much a license is going to cost. One thing to note is that one of the benefits to maybe work with a professional, especially in this stage, is that if you're unfamiliar with these three areas, there's a good chance that when you are approaching a licensing deal with any type of brand or IP, they could end up maximizing each category from you. You might not be getting the best deal or value from that. All right, so the next part. You've got your royalties figured out. You know how much you're going to pay. Now it's about how you're going to use it. You're thinking pretty straightforward. I paid for the license. I should be able to use it however I want. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. Once you have the rights, the brand actually needs to approve everything. And when I say that, in terms of the approvals, it can be anything from the design and look of the character or the brand that you're going to incorporate into your game, to the action that it's going to perform in the game. Maybe it can't perform a certain dance move because there's a copyright on that dance move. So that brand or IP or celebrity that you're using, they don't want it to be used that way. And I'm going to give you some examples right now. Let's say you license out the likeness of a celebrity to be used in the game. They give you a set of portraits, they give you the style guides, they give you the restrictions and how it should be designed and developed. You're thinking, no problem, this is pretty easy. Quick little template. You go ahead and you design it. Everything is to the proportion, down to scale, color tone, everything. You submit that to the brand or licensor, and they come back and they say, unfortunately, it's not approved. You're scratching your head. You're probably wondering why. You did it to the original specs already, but the nose is too big. You're like, what? I did everything to the specs that I was given. And that's the thing. With licensing, everything can be a little bit subjective afterwards. So you're back to the drawing board to do a new design. This also applies to even objects or weapons and things like that. So let's say you license another character from a different movie, and that character is known to have a special sword. Same thing. You get the specifications, the dimensions, the colors. You go ahead and you do the design. You submit that for an approval, and it comes back and it's denied. There's certain changes that need to happen. You're wondering, what change? Well, they tell you that the sword needs to be bigger now, and you're wondering why. Like, we did everything to your specs. Basically, they can tell you that when the sword is, or the character is striking with the sword, you can't even tell that the sword is the special sword anymore. It looks generic, so you have to go ahead and make it bigger. Things like this can go back and forth on different rounds of revisions. So ultimately that is part of the approvals. Another part of the rights that is very important when you're looking at licensing is the usage rights. This is actually a huge one, especially in video games. Your players are spread across around the world. You're probably more dominant in a certain region than another. So you definitely need to understand where the rights and use of that IP can be used. For example, let's say anime, Japanese anime, very popular. Everybody typically wants to use it in some sort of a game, and there's always a nice fit. But anime rights can get very complicated. Even from a whole series, a certain character might not be allowed to be used in North America, but it can be used in Europe. Or if you want to use it in Asia, that's definitely no. Usually Japan kind of handles all of that IP themselves. So that's a huge thing of usage rights, and even how it's going to interact. Like I mentioned previously, there might be a dance that you want your character to do, but you can't have them do that dance right now because of potential copyright issues. So this is what we touched on so far. We've touched on what licensing is, the two main things that people care about, which is how much it's going to cost, what goes into negotiating those costs, and then the rights. And now we know what crossovers really are, which is licensing and the benefits. So gets us to the next part. These are common questions that I get a lot too when I talk to different video games, but it's about who crossovers are for. You know, we read in the media, the previous ones that I showed you, people think that crossovers are only for the big games, or they might think that, you know, their game is too small. Or maybe the game is a casual game, it doesn't fit crossovers. Or it's a premium game, there's no downloadable content, no skins to buy. Or it's a console game, crossovers and downloadable content is only for mobile games. So are crossovers really for everyone? Well, unfortunately, crossovers are not for everyone. But it's not for everyone due to these comments that people think, you know, it's not because your game's too small. It's not because it's a casual game. It really does boil down to the economics and the cost. IP can be pretty expensive, but at the same time, it's not. And it's not because, you know, when you think of IP, typically you always think about the AAA. It's like, do I want Disney characters in my game? Do I want Marvel characters in my game? Do I want the #1 movie out in the theaters, the box office hit in my game? That's not always the case. But if it were, that's where the benefits of working with a professional could also be good for it, because a professional might have a better relationship with, let's say, Disney or Marvel. And let's be honest, if you're going to go buy something from somebody you don't know, you're probably going to pay a higher price than going through somebody you do know. Secondly, there's always IP for everybody. So once we can alleviate the barrier to entry, which is cost, the other benefits of working with a professional might be, do you know who the #1 toy company is in Korea? If so, great. But do you also know where their next region and their push is? Once you know that, you also know what type of games that they want to license out to and activate in. Do you know what type of deals that they're willing to make? So this is where I mean where licensing may not be for everybody, but primarily due to costs. But at the same time, licensing can be for everybody. And that's where Epik, we're a little bit different. Our goal is to make licensing more accessible to everybody. Our vision is to make crossovers more prominent. And so working with a professional can definitely help you alleviate those barriers and learn more of how you can get involved. And lastly is about putting different IP into different games. So working with a professional, not only is it about the relationship they have, because they have the ability to put IP into multiple games. Think of it like a rock concert tour. There's multiple stops for that IP. They can now help you get a cheaper price, cheaper deal for IP into your game. And here's a quick example of that. So this past year alone, at Epik, we've put Ultraman, we've put them into 3 different games right now. Smashy City, mobile casual game, Arena Valor, the #1 MOBA with 100 million daily active users right now. This just came out. And then Override, a premium game that's going to be on consoles. So again, it's not about the console, the type of game. It's really about economics and adding value. Okay, so now we've learned about what licensing is. We know how much it's going to cost and how I can use it. And now we know that licensing can be for everybody. So now where do I start? Well, the licensing process can actually just begin with 4 simple steps. And the first one is really the brainstorming, the idea. How do you come up with that? Well, I'll be honest, there's no idea that is too crazy. And I'll give you an example. What if I told you that there's a fantasy MMORPG, knights, dragons, demons, swords, and you want to put a heavy metal rock band into it? Not only that, the heavy metal rock band is from 15 years ago. I was scratching my head too. I was like, how is this going to work? You know, you see in the media, DJs into games, I get that. But a rock band from 15 years ago, fantasy MMORPG, not too sure. But it happened, and this is what we did. We had put corn into Adventure Quest. The concept was, it was called the Monster Mosh Pit Battle Arena. Even at the time when I heard that, I'm still wondering, how is that going to look? I don't get it. But it was a hit. Basically, the players of the game in the MMO would converge into an arena. They'd be battling monsters and demons, fighting. Korn was playing 3 live song sets. It was awesome. After it, you can now buy Korn branded skins, items, weapons, power-ups. It was phenomenal. I loved it. So for those of you who are wondering what it would have looked like, here it is. Oh. Unfortunately, the video is not going to play. Happy to share this slide deck with everybody afterwards. And, you know, at least you can see the video. Okay, so now that you've gotten the brainstorming out of the way, you know how to get the brands. Last thing I want to add before I jump into this is that with any brainstorming session, you should probably have at least 5 to 10 different IP ideas that you want to incorporate. The reason is your first 2 or 3 probably may be out of your range, or they may not even want to be in the game. So that's why it's good to have backup options of 5 to 10. Secondly, it's also good to work with a professional because they can also add on to more ideas or more brands or IP that you thought may not even been available. So definitely think of that when you're in your brainstorming session. Now, next sort, proposal to the brand. How's that going to work? How do I reach out to the brand? Well, there's 2 options. The first one being you can directly reach out to them. How? Well, if you have a direct relationship with somebody who can get you access to a brand or IP to talk about ideas, that's great. You're thinking that might also be your best option. Why? You save money because you don't have to pay any external fees, and you get to build a relationship with the brand yourself, and that's great. However, there are benefits to work with a professional, like I mentioned. A few of those are actually getting the value, getting the extra bonuses from maybe better deals from their relationships. But you might think, but I'm going to lose my ability to have that relationship. You may with certain professionals, but again, it just depends who you work with. You might think that it's also going to cost a lot of money. Again, it just depends who you work with. That's one thing that Epik, we like to do a little bit differently. We do it all for free. It sounds funny, but you don't pay us for anything until we get you a successful licensing deal. So that's extra value add there. And we're pretty transparent on what we do with our clients. So definitely happy to help with those relationships. So now that you have the ability to reach out to the brand, you're gonna submit your proposal. You're probably wondering now, how long is this whole process gonna take? How long is the deal? Well, the deal can take anywhere from 4 to 16 months. There's nothing too abstract here that you need to be aware of. Part of it is based upon you. You are in complete control of how fast the deal could go, because it will depend on your own internal development time. How fast, when you want to do the event, how fast your team works, what's their bandwidth, etc. The next part that can impact this, though, is the contract negotiations. So unfortunately, a lot of the things get tied up in legal, which can extend the period on how fast a deal can happen. This is where maybe working with a professional is also beneficial. Because we do have those type of relationships, we have the ability to kind of nudge certain agreements faster than another, even though it may not be a priority at the moment for the brand, because they might have other things going on. But things to consider, those are the extra value adds. But in summary, the time to close the deal is anywhere from 4 to 16 months. Really, that's there. And the last part, this is the fun part. This is what everybody wants to do, and that's why they're doing a crossover. You figured out how much the brand is going to cost. You figured out what's going to be designed. Your deal is closed. Money's been paid. Now you can get to the fun stuff. You crack that bottle of champagne with your team. You're all happy and celebrating. And that's when you break the news to the team that they also got to put in overtime for the next 3 months. But one thing, this is where the approvals come in. If you remember previously, I talked about approvals and how the brand needs to approve everything. Well, this is when you get to have that kind of fun. However, one thing that I didn't mention previously is, even though you might have the best development team and everything is on schedule and you work like clockwork, what if you just can't get a hold of the person to make that approval? And this is what can really happen. You know, people at brands, the licensors, they're busy. They're looking at other deals right now. They've already collected your check. How do you get them to approve that nose if it's done right? Well, that relationship that you thought you'd be building with them hasn't fully materialized. So this is where working with a professional can also be beneficial. At Epik, we like to help. You know, we get involved directly in the project management process. We can help prime the IP and the brands to be ready for a quick review. We can nudge them along a little bit faster if you have challenges. So again, that's the whole licensing process. And kind of brings us to the next part. You know, we figured out how much everything's going to cost. We're ready to, we've done our development. We're excited. You know how to do a licensing deal now. But what are the real benefits of crossovers? How's that going to help your game? And again, it doesn't matter what type of game you are. Every game has this number one problem, which is new content creation, user retention, and monetization. Well, these are the benefits of doing crossovers and licensing. Really, it boils down to increasing player engagement. Our clients have all reported, on average, that engagement can increase by 300%. With that, incremental revenue does increase as well. The amount it increases varies, but that's because each game has a different threshold of how much money it can make. But this is the key one that's beneficial. Repeat crossovers of 3 times. That's what we've been experiencing at Epik. What does that mean? Well, what that means is that for every client that we've helped with 1 crossover, they've now signed up to do 3 more. That's pretty phenomenal. It's what's happening in the industry. And we're pretty excited that this is just the first beginning. We definitely anticipate crossovers are going to increase. So maybe stay tuned and for more of that. So now that we know that crossovers are licensing, the benefits, how to do licensing, what's the future of licensing and crossovers? Well, this is what we believe is the future. Future of licensing is actually blockchain collectibles. Blockchain is a true link between real world and virtual worlds, and brands make the digital world more relatable to their real world. And licensing is the bridge to that. And having blockchain digital collectibles is what gives a true utility and extra value to end consumers. And you're going to see things like this coming up real soon. Ultraman, there's going to be a blockchain digital collectible from there. As I mentioned, Epik is not only a licensing agency dealing with thousands of different brands with over 350 game companies, but we're also a technology company, and we're releasing our own digital collectible platforms. So definitely stay tuned for that. But this is the main part that we're here for. It's about licensing and how we do it. So again, you learned about what licensing is, how it's going to work, how much it will cost. It is for everybody. And then the licensing process, either do it yourself or work with an agent. Definitely feel free to reach out. We're happy to talk about how we can help, maybe get, even if you want a quick quote or pricing on what different IP may cost, we're happy to do so. And you can get a hold of me here. There's my email. You can check us out on our website. And right now we have some time for some Q&A. Okay, so we got one right here from Ole. So if we have game engine, we can make a game of certain type and reach out. So they buy our license with payment for the engine, and customization works, and we both share the sales. Great question. So in general, games do buy game engines. That's why Unity is there, Unreal Game Engine. So yeah, to your point, yes, people do that. Okay, great. So like I said, there's my email. I'll even quickly throw it into the chat here. And happy to have a coffee with anybody who wants to learn more about licensing and how we can help you with your games. Thanks.